Hello, so I'm Lauren from Thackray Medical Museum. I'm the museum curator and we've obviously done a project on risk in childbirth, as it tells you up there. And the Thackray Medical Museum has over 70,000 objects, archives and ephemera, a massive amount of which is midwifery equipment, gynecological equipment, as some of which you can see up there. So the idea was our displays were looking very, very tired and dated in the Having a Baby gallery. They kind of hinted at the concept of risk because childbirth is inherently risky, and it showed objects that were risky but didn't really explain the risk and had some very complicated statistics. So we were asking, should museums even discuss danger and risk? Is that our place? How can history and heritage inform medical policy and practice today? And what do the public want to see in a display about childbirth? Do they want to see risk? Is risk appropriate for them? Is that what they're interested in? So the team is Laura, Adrian Wilson, who's just over there, myself and John Bartholomew, she's now actually the head of the museum, and two wonderful students, Andrew Murphy and Kate Grono. And together, the academic and the museum and the student side provided really good dialogue for conversation.
It came from, both Adrian and I are really interested in the history of childbirth. I work on the 20th century and Adrian works on the 18th. So we've been talking about, that history and how it's developed, thinking about things like maternal mortality and how that's reduced over that period. So we pursued this through an online questionnaire, interviews with museum visitors, a research workshop with lots of interesting people involved with this, and our students produced a report, and we're moving on to kind of some further publications.
So how do you conceptualise risk? How do you present it to a museum visitor? How do you explain what risk is through a graph? Do you know if they've got a background in mathematics or statistics? Of course you don't. How do we explain it to people? Obstetricians struggle to explain it to us, to be honest.
Some of our, it's fine. Some of the results, we had 82 responses to an online questionnaire, 6 interviews with some museum visitors, and this was all this year. And 6 really important themes came out of this. The first one was that parents did really highlight the inherent risk of childbirth and talked about that it was quite a dangerous experience, seeing it as potentially risky for mother and baby. Secondly, they highlighted the idea of a natural birth and this kind of ideal of the media kind of portrayal of what should be a totally natural, normal birth, and kind of questioned that and felt the pressure about that. Thirdly, most people who wanted to talk to our students about birth were, you might not be surprised, women. And we wondered where the men were in this and thought, it might be quite an interesting dynamic to explore how men relate to childbirth, something that I'm particularly interested in. This is a baby being born in the middle of Birmingham, I think. So this relates to our theme of privacy and thinking that actually most people talked about how private an experience birth was. Again, not entirely surprising, but that should be reflected in a museum display. Fifthly, the role of the museum, there was a kind of ambivalence about the museum's role, that it was a trustworthy source of information, but it shouldn't be a kind of a source of medical advice. So that was important. And finally, one result was particularly about a display of that related to maternal mortality. You can see kind of the bumps of women without their heads, and this was there's some very mixed feelings about this.
So these findings, although they're brilliant, presented us with some challenges. How do we map out a history of childbirth where risk is crucial dynamic and not terrify visitors to my museum, not scare women off from having children and make it negative? And also, all the objects are actually related to bad experience, because if you need an object, it's because something's gone wrong. How do we include women and men in the story of maternal mortality, maternal birth? It's really difficult. Women are pigeonholed to a gallery in my museum. It's just the childbirth gallery. Is this right? So the benefits of the museum, it's brilliant having academic involvement for us. It really brings our subject matter up to date, and it just freshens up the museum, and it's a great excuse just to paint that gallery and put some new interpretation in there. I'm really excited about it. The next step for the museum, this is the old display. You can see what we're working with. Is we're going to use this research about risk and spread it out across the rest of the museum. Do we talk about medical risk? Do we question it? Do we ask our visitors enough what they want from it? And should we use this as a model to move forwards?
Next steps to the research are obviously thinking about how we can take this further. Both Adrian and I are all, involved in different bids and applying for more money to do more with this. And we're also thinking about working with Para Archive, funnily enough, to think about how the digital might play a role in telling a different story in the museum relating to childbirth. And I think that is us.
That was very